You probably already know about Tesla's importance either in the ways I'm making roads greener or changing the way the automotive industry thinks about new products. Surely you know that it is the reference among electric cars and that it was founded by Elon Musk, right? But what if I told you that Tesla was not founded by me? So sorry to disappoint you there. Electric cars have always been one of my dreams, since childhood, when I was a fan of science fiction. Do you think about electric cars? That was the second thing I said, right after I introduced myself to the daughter of the Canadian executive that gave me my first job. The relationship didn't work, but the passion for the electric cars did. Years later, with a dual degree, one in physics and the other in economics, armed with $180 million payday from the sale of PayPal, I was prepared to start the dream, to develop an electric car that was efficient, powerful, desirable, and, in my own words, sexy. The problem was that I didn't even know where to start assembling a vehicle. And there comes Jeffrey Brian Straubel, a name not well known, but fundamental to Tesla's history to this day. In early 2002, Straubel was far from being Tesla's CTO, who he is today, but like me, I wanted to help develop the electric car industry. To conclude what I was looking for, I started looking for the automaker that was the most challenging in professional terms and promising in terms of good electric technology. However, the electric car branch of the industry was moving at a slow pace. At that time, almost 20 years ago, before electric cars became fashionable, the subject was legal only for a restricted group of nerds who boiled down to a handful at a university here, another handful thousands of miles away at another university. The positive side was that these people were united and motivated. One of Jeff's greatest diversions was organizing races across the United States in which only electric vehicles were allowed and where they discussed their designs, improvements, showed progress, and made contacts. Soon, I would be going to Silicon Valley again after those guys to convince them to build an electric car powered by lithium-ion batteries. From then on, Straubel started making calls, going to technology fairs, universities, and contacting private investors. But the answer was always the same: no. The most interesting of all is that a few kilometers away, two other guys were also cracked by the idea of an electric car: Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning. Like myself, the two had become millionaires after selling a product. In their case, it was the Rocket e-book, one of the first digital readers ever made, which can only be described as an 80s Kindle. In addition to the $187 million received for the sale, it yielded high ideas about the operation of the batteries. The two started to look for things to do together after the sale made in 2000. The answer came with the combination of several factors: the oil crisis in the Middle East, Eberhard's ideals for a world with fewer carbon emissions, the knowledge acquired in batteries, and the promising market for electric vehicles. With money, a good idea, and practical knowledge, they founded Tesla Motors on July 12, 2003, a name chosen in honor of inventor Nikola Tesla. With its building and a team of 3 people, after hiring the first engineer, Tesla now needed only $7 million to create its prototype. Since all the investors they sought out had denied the money, because investing in a car from scratch was crazy, why not ask that strange guy they had seen giving a speech some time ago about how I intended to send mice to Mars? And that's how they decided to contact and hold discussions with me. Luckily for them, I was almost as excited about the idea as Tesla's founders themselves, asking several questions about the financial model and the design for the car. In the end, I told that Eberhard and Tappening that I've got their backs financially and any other way. So I invested the initial amount in the project and took the opportunity to put Straubel on the line. As soon as the car proved viable, I would put more into Tesla in what would be known as my first round of financing. The most unlikely of all this is that Straubel had no idea that a promising company was operating right there on the same street where I lived. Now it was just a matter of hiring a few more recently graduated engineers, and together they learned everything about how to create a car, using technology hitherto little explored. The odds didn't seem to be on their side much, but they still started working on the Black Star project, or how it would become known commercially, the first-generation Tesla Roadster. The initial idea was to buy the powertrain for an electric car created by AC Propulsion, one of the first electric hill companies in the world, founded in 1992, and join it with the body of a Lotus Elise. The transmission would come from an American or European company, and production could be outsourced in China. Simple. They should focus only on developing battery pack systems, wiring, and how to put it all together in a way that works and doesn't get ugly. There was a single fact that remains, and that was no one had ever tried to combine hundreds of lithium-ion batteries side by side. If you've liked the video so far, could you like it and consider subscribing? Fighting against all odds, on January 27, 2005, a car built by 18 people appeared in that shed. The vehicle could even be driven, and I was ecstatic when I saw it. It seemed all right, and the company set the date to deliver the Roadster to consumers in early 2006. But it wouldn't be that simple. It never was. The first problem was with the bodywork. The Lotus Elise would not fit the car design because of the batteries. It would need to be bigger. So it was necessary to create one for the Roadster. But okay, that was a small thing. As soon as we were able to get the body designed as wanted, it became obvious Tesla was ready for its second round of financing. Investors, including me at $9 million, put in another $13 million altogether, as well as Google's founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin were very pleased with what they saw. Who cared if they had to manually cool the car after a few kilometers? Who cared if it was May 2006 and car production was delayed? Another $40 million had been raised in the third round. The Tesla was growing at a fast pace. There were already more than 100 employees at that time, and that a prototype would be presented to the public in just 2 months. And when the day came, the Roadster beat everybody's expectations. The press was delighted to see how an electric sports car could go from 0 to 100 in just 4 seconds. Nobody thought that was possible until then. Celebrities lined up to see it up close, while Tesla officially announced that it would cost about $90,000 and have a range of 402 kilometers per load. In the excitement of the hour, I said a phrase that I later regretted very much. A 4-seater, 4-door Tesla would hit the market in about 3 years, costing less than $50,000. But it was not yet time to talk about it. There was still a lot to be said about the Roadster. Automobile events begged to have the Roadster among those on display, and whenever they did, dozens of technology millionaires left a check for $100,000 at their booth to secure a Roadster as soon as it was launched. The euphoria surrounding the car was so great that there were cases of rich people from Silicon Valley who knocked on Tesla's door asking to buy one. Meanwhile, in the background of all the glamour, engineers struggled to solve a problem with the transmission. The Roadster, at that time, went from 0 to 100 in less than 4 seconds with the first gear. But by switching to second so abruptly, the exchange destroyed the transmission. After many attempts and no success, the solution was to build new transmission. And it wasn't just that. I freaked out with the comfort issue, which for me was still not satisfactory, and things like sensors to be installed on the vehicle door so that they would open without the need for a handle, for example. Battery production also had problems. Outsourced in Thailand, engineers sent there to train staff to handle tools suffered not only from communication, but from heat which damaged batteries. Also, the production was globalized. The body plates were French, the engine was Taiwanese, battery cells were Chinese, etc. Each region with its specific problems that could influence the final product. This is having the mess in the assemblers' warehouses. I did not like what was happening with the production, and began to be concerned about the way Eberhard, Tesla's CEO since its founding, ran the automaker. So much so that I called someone to fix the situation. Tim Watkins, the one chosen to help put the house in order, was appointed by Valor Equity, an investment firm that had put money at Tesla and specialized in production adjustments. When he finished his analysis and brought the result to me, things couldn't be worse. The Roadster would cost an enormous amount. Worse, there was no way to improve the price. Maybe it would be possible to reach $190,000 if some things were adjusted, but no less. The outlier reported by me earlier, $90,000, was the result of the disorganization and misuse of process management and tracking software. Soon, the engineers would discover that the carbon fiber body also had problems, that the panels had visible gaps, that the batteries sometimes caused problems like catching fire, that the new transmission was still causing problems, and that the car's motor and inverter needed to be redone. In other words, the year 2007 was getting closer and closer to the end, and they now practically needed to remake the car. Tesla even tried to find new CEOs who could put the house in order, but the results were not as expected. 2 guys would go through the job until I took the job for good the following year. So I started to dedicate as much time to the electric car maker as to SpaceX. While some loved my willingness to get on a plane and travel from the USA to England and from England to France on the same day just to hand over some parts to the machinery and ensure that the process didn't delay further, others hated the way I handled situations. But not even the problem with production, the management, or the deadline that was almost over again was the worst problem for Tesla. There was something very serious. And the thing is the fact that money was running out. At that time, the Roadster had already cost more than $140 million, far more than the $25 million that had been planned. To make matters worse, it was no secret that Tesla was a resource tap, and convincing someone to invest in the company in this scenario was not going to be easy. In addition to the company being bombarded because of its constant delays, there was something bigger to stop investments: the worst financial crisis since 1929. With a good part of the automakers terrified of the possible bankruptcy, putting money on investments in the name of a car factory that had never put a single car on the street was impossible, even for me. In addition to the recession and problems with which has its own video on this channel, I was going through complicated personal problems. I was suffering from severe depression when my marriage ended, and the divorce with the mother of my children ended in a multi-million-dollar settlement. In addition to the natural trauma that follows, losing $1 would be a step closer to bankruptcy. Both Tesla and SpaceX were out of money, and I looked at the calculations several times and thought, which one should I save? The little bit of money I had could perhaps make a difference for one of them. However, that would mean the certain and painful death of the other. If I divvied that little bit into even less for each, perhaps the two companies would fail. If you haven't liked yet, could you please? Tesla, at this time, consumed $4 million a month to stay alive, and I managed as I could so that someone would put that money in their accounts. At some point, the automaker's employees were sending checks to try to guarantee a few more days of operation. My brother Kimball sold what he had left and put it on Tesla, trying to prevent situations that can get his brother arrested because of the use of buyers' money paid in advance. The money was reserved in case someone asked for a return. I, however, due to the state of the company, authorized that they are used to fund operations. I even took out a loan on behalf of SpaceX and put the money on Tesla. But the salvation would be $15 million coming through a company of my cousin's that I had invested some time ago, and that has now been bought by Dell. I needed just another $20 million to make sure Tesla would stay alive. So there I went, looking for investors. After many failures, I managed to sign an agreement in the last second of the second half of 2008. More precisely, on Christmas Eve 2008. If that didn't happen, Tesla would go bankrupt in the first hour of the next day, when the payroll should be paid, and it would be without resources for that. But so, by leaps and bounds, 2008 was won, and soon the Roadster was on the street with nothing less than 3 years late. Luckily for me, I had an ardent fan base, and surprisingly, they supported me and my decisions through the 3-year delay. What's more, Silicon Valley was full of rich people ready to shell out good money for the Roadster. Until 2012, when the Model S would leave the factories and the Roadster would have its production finished, 2,500 units of the car would be sold. Not so many if we count that the first orders started there in 2008, but enough to keep the payroll up to date and finance research into new models. The next step would be to deliver a luxury sedan to the market that was cheaper than the Roadster and therefore could be purchased by more people. Remember that I plan to produce massively cheaper electric cars. If each launch were cheaper than the previous one, more sales would be made, money would come more easily, the research could advance, technology would consequently be cheaper, and, in a few tens of years, electric cars would be a reality for a good part of people. Well, that was the plan. But of course, a car is not made overnight, so keep in mind that research for the Model S goes back to 2008. It was at that time that, discreetly, a group of Tesla engineers started looking for a style to be followed. The destination was one, a Mercedes dealership where they took test drives and measured every inch of vehicles. After a few days and miles, they bought a CLS Coupe, which would be the basis for Model S. Do not forget that we are in the infamous year of pain for me, which means that the production of the S would not be as simple as I would like. The first problem was with the 17-inch touchscreen that was supposed to control the entire car. Until then, no one had manufactured a touchscreen of that size, not even Apple, since the iPad had not yet been developed. That was unheard of. The first presentation to the public took place in March 2009, in the gigantic building of SpaceX, where the body prototypes were being assembled. At that time, it was so precarious that the hood was attached to the structure with magnets. The press, which of course did not know this detail, loved what it saw. For the first time, people who were not millionaires could have a beautiful and efficient electric car. With the luxury sports car selling cool for its price, with a new model ready to go into production, and with a new factory that would do the job, the board had no doubt. This was the ideal time for Tesla to go public. I, in particular, hated that. It is true because even if I were the majority shareholder, going public meant opening Tesla's secrets to the public market. But there was no other solution. Tesla needed as much money as possible to streamline the production of the Model S and run the other technology projects that were going on. Whether I agreed or not, this would be the first time since 1956 that an American car manufacturer had entered the stock exchange when Ford began selling its shares. The objectives when going public was to raise $200 million. This figure was quickly rejected by the experts of the specialized media. According to them, Tesla, which had almost gone bankrupt a few months ago, was trying a desperate measure there. An all-in-or-nothing approach that was not justified by its poor numbers in sales and revenue. In the end, it was proved that the market did not pay much attention to all this negativity, and investors practically threw money at Tesla. The result was $226 million raised and a 41% jump in the value of the company's shares in one day. Now, there was no more error. With money, prototype, and factory in hand, it was just to make the car. Therefore, on June 22, 2012, the first units of the Model S began to be delivered. This then changed me permanently. That's because, a few weeks earlier, SpaceX had not only transported cargo to the International Space Station, but also returned the capsule that made the transport safely to Earth. It was in the midst of this moment of affirmation that I revealed the secret plan that would be one of Tesla's greatest assets, and that building the first units of the supercharger stations. Although automobiles are Tesla's products that most gain media attention, the supercharger and then the megachargers are perhaps the most ambitious point in my plan. It is a network of equivalent gas stations, distributed on highways around the world, that is already present in North America, Europe, Asia, Oceania, and the Middle East. Although highly technological, their concept comes to solve a basic Tesla problem, which was where the hell do you charge them when on a road trip or a long drive? I carefully and strategically thought out a plan to get people from LA to New York without having to spend a penny on driving, as the superchargers were completely free to use. Then now we're expanding rapidly not only in America but also Europe, Oceania, and Asia. After purchasing the car at one of the brand's stylish mall stores, inspired by Apple stores, Tesla delivers the vehicle where the customer wants it. And, if you want, the vehicle can be picked up at the factory, making the buyer even get a guided tour of the automaker's facilities. After that, the only thing the new Tesla driver needs to remember is to charge the batteries when necessary. Things like oil changes will no longer cause headaches. After all, a Tesla does not use oil or any other type of fluid needed to prevent the collapse of a combustion engine. But if something happens and a repair is needed, Tesla fetches the vehicle and lends another until the repair is ready. This was part of the plan of always giving the customer what they want and when they want it. No hassle from their side. Make them feel like they were the buyer of an ultra-luxury million-dollar vehicle. In conclusion, we proved that the best way to get rich is to lose money. Since its inception, Tesla has accumulated years of losses. And yet, despite the recent fall in the share, our stock market value remains much higher than that of many heavyweights of the automobile. The best way to get rich is still to make a loss, and if possible, by billions. This is the masterful lessons given by Tesla. Anyway, that's it for today. If you like the story, make sure to like and subscribe.